to the Once Upon a Niger podcast.
Welcome. It's episode 6.
Yeah, episode
Numero, what's the Spanish for 6?
Says. Yes.
How do you say, should we greet them in Spanish?
Spanish on a Nigerian podcast.
I'll show your skills, man.
I think we should be introducing maybe in different dialects or languages in Nigerian nation. Yeah.
Can you?
Oh gosh, no, let me not expose myself.
Okay, we'll leave that for another day. But welcome.
So today, we're going to be delving into a really important woman in Nigerian history. Like, we started the last episode speaking about Ladi Kwali and her impact and important influence on like Nigerian crafts and arts and everything surrounding that and her gaining recognition. But we don't think we can talk on this podcast without speaking about another important woman in the political sphere of Nigeria. And who would that woman be?
That would be Frances Abigail Funmilayo Ransom Kuti. I wanted to say Frances Abigail Funmilayo Thomas before. That was her maiden name before she got married.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, she married Oladotun Ransom Kuti. And that was how she got the surname Kuti. Yeah. That's what we're talking about.
That's what we're talking about, yeah.
I guess people can make a few connections by now, but hopefully at the end.
Yeah, so this woman was, she was many things. So she was a women's rights activist. She was a political campaigner. She was a teacher, educator of women in Nigeria. And she really made herself known to the elites in Nigeria and really challenged a lot of the status quo. That's the word, yeah. Status quo in Nigeria. I mean, her upbringing, she came from a well-to-do family, and her parents really valued the importance, really valued education for boys and girls, which wasn't as common during her time, for her age. And I think that's a really important note to make, because that thinking and her having her parents care so much about her education really shaped and influenced the kind of work that she would do when she was older. So I think she was the first girl to attend a grammar school.
Yeah.
Where she grew up. And I think because of that, if she wasn't educated, if her parents hadn't instilled that value in her, she wouldn't have been able to do the work that she did, and wouldn't have started a great lineage of women activists.
Yeah, it's interesting you say she's from a well-to-do family, because now I think about it, her mother was a seamstress and her father, I can't remember what her father was now, but he wasn't particularly wealthy or anything like that. But her grandmother, I believe, was Sarah Thomas, and she was a returnee slave. And she traced back her ancestry to Abeokuta. So she was born in Abeokuta, and her parents were probably what I would say just low income, just normal family in that sense. But
I think the reason why I say that is because I think she was when I say well to do, I think her dad was a chief.
Right.
So the well to do in the sense that she comes from
influential family.
Yeah,
in
she
that
comes from
sense.
An influential family. So yeah, that's what I'm guessing at.
Yeah. And the beginning of, so you mentioned how she was the first female to go to grammar school, Abeokuta Grammar School in Nigeria, and then she subsequently went to Cheshire in England, where she studied for 3 years. But I feel like this was the rebirth of her, in a sense, her going to, I don't know why, for some reason, because she went to England as Frances Abigail Funmilayo, literally being like the third name in her list of names. But then by the time she came back, she decided to just take on the name. She decided to reject the anglicized name, the English name, and just take on the name Funmilayo. And as I was looking into it, I was like, what happened in her psyche? Undoubtedly, she must have experienced some sort of racism or whatever was going on in England at the time, and that must surely have played a part in her outlook towards life and
becoming and associating herself more closely with her ethnic roots.
Yeah, and even when she went to England, it's funny, she studied elocution, dressmaking, and something else, and it's not exactly the most they're not like academic subjects or anything like that. And I think for some reason I find it quite interesting that you go all the way to England to study dressmaking.
But I suppose it's, remembering that this was during the time of occupation of Nigeria. I mean, Nigeria was a colony of the British Empire.
Yeah.
And to put in context, so Funmilayo was born in 1900 and she died in 1978. So her youth was shaped, when you're thinking about the early 20th century, you're thinking, okay, World War One has just happened, Roaring 20s. Like, this is a time when that was the occupation of women during that time. So I think that helps me anyway when I'm trying to think about what she was doing.
To put in that historical context, definitely that helps to understand, because I can imagine someone reading this or listening just thinking, oh, dressmaking. Because when you compare to what people come to the UK to study now, you come to very academic subjects. You pay so much money to come abroad now, to go abroad to study in the UK or in America. And when you do go and study dressmaking and stuff like that, it's almost like a luxury, like something you do after, just because you want to.
Oh, I think that's interesting you say that, but I think it might be a thing of also class, You're going to do these elocution, dressmaking. Why? Elocution is for what purpose, right? It's to speak better.
Yeah.
Why do you need to speak better? Because you're expected to be in certain circles, and your accent needs to, be of a particular standard, so that you're seen to be in the right, class. And so I think. Today we may look back at elocution classes and dressmaking and we may think, oh, that's nothing, it's not as valuable today because most women, or not most women, but women work and strive to work in areas that aren't solely relegated to that. But at the time,
that was a significant
that was, I think, those kind of activities were of, those are the activities of women of a middle upper class. Working class women were not going to elocution.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that is reflected in the sort of activism that she then did when she went back to Nigeria. She went back to Nigeria, she was a teacher, and I think for a short while actually she wasn't really engaging in politics or activism or anything like that. But then, if I recall correctly, a conversation with a friend who is a market woman about the taxation issues that they were having, etc., and needing advocacy. That was how she sort of started getting involved in the plight of this woman, and she became exposed because, like you just pointed out, she was of a different social class. And I think when you're of a different social class, there's a level of distance between yourself and the other people, the other classes within your community, and it's like something needs to bring you into their world. And I guess the question is, what brought her into the world of this local market woman for her to then become so motivated and so emboldened and invested, as it were, in their plight and wanting to effect change for them.
Yeah, I think it's how she did that is to do with the work that she did, and she founded the Women's Union of Abeokuta, and in that work she was like educating women, I think of the same class to her, but then she started engaging with market traders. And I found this interesting, this really good quote that she says, because this was around the time of her own like political awakening, I would say, in terms of fighting for women's rights. And she says that the true position of Nigerian women had to be judged from the women who carried babies on their backs and farmed from sunrise to sunset, not women who used tea, sugar and flour for breakfast. and I think that is it's really good that she recognized that.
Yes.
And she recognized, her own position and her own privilege in the work that she was doing, and that, yes, to a degree that, my condition and my development needs to move forward, but it has to be done with like all kinds of women.
Exactly.
In Nigeria. I really love that phrase.
That is an interesting quote, because they are the majority, really. And I guess when you think, oh, I'm not affected, it's only a matter of time before it comes to you. Particularly when the majority they're feeling pinched and they're feeling the pain. But it's also interesting the way I think it's interesting how she recognized that education is the pathway, or one of the pathways to their freedom. Because I guess at the time, with all this taxation, and perhaps letters would have been written, and people would have come and said this order came from this place, and if you can't read what is being said, you're at a disadvantage. So she organized this literacy classes for women with less education, and then she encouraged the elite as well. So she almost kind of like brought together this community, this two world, and at a time she recognized also the disparity and how it can be. It's one thing to say, oh, we're bringing the illiterates, as they were known, or the low class women, the market women, and bring this elite women together. But there needs to be a common ground. There needs to be a kind of they need to come together in an environment where one is not feeling better than the other, or one is not feeling they're not feeling like they're not good enough to be in your midst. And so what she started to do then, or what they started to do, was they started to speak Yoruba in their meetings, and then they started to wear the traditional clothing to as a show of solidarity, in a sense. But I think it was much more than that, because it was saying something. Because as opposed to what would happen now, actually, where when the elite and the non-elite come together, there's it's almost always the elites trying to bring the non-elite to their level, where it's like, oh, now we're going to sew them some suits, and we're going to make them wear,
make them look like us.
Make them look like us.
Yeah.
Exactly. As opposed to what Ransom Kuti and her fellow women did, where they recognized their commonality in that this is us, this is our people. Traditional clothing is who we are. This is our language, where whether you're elite or you're non-elite, we all understand each other, and there's no barrier to our fellowship, to our union.
Yeah.
And I think to a large extent that goes a long way in fostering this kind of group that is going to be solid enough to recognize the common goal and to fight the enemy, in quote, in a sense, without feeling like this is our savior and we are just the So that was interesting. So the other thing, she was involved in quite a lot of protests, and I'd like us to discuss the particular protest against the Alake of Egbaland.
Okay.
Is that something? So I think the gist of it, the protest against the Alake of Egbaland, which he eventually had to give up his position. I was listening somewhere where they were linking the activities happening at that time to what happened to the end of World War II, where
So when this happened, when? For our listeners.
1946.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think World War II had just
Finished,
and the residue of that was a lot of development work had to happen, or social work had to happen, and that had to be funded somehow. And as we all know, one of the ways in which these things are funded is through taxation. And because there was indirect rule from Britain at the time, so all these local chiefs and people were put in place to collect taxes from these women, from the citizens, right? And what had happened in Egbaland was that the taxation became so heavy upon the women, where they were taxing, they were invading their houses to collect their food. There was high rate of water tax, food tax, heavy taxation. And it's interesting as well that they were taxing women from the age of 15, but then the men were not being taxed until the age of 18. And you think that really doesn't make any sense. And part of the atrocity that was happening was that obviously when you come to a person's house and there's a young girl, how do you determine what age? How do you know what age she is? So what they started doing, sometimes they would strip them to determine whether
that is disgraceful.
Yeah, whether they built enough or developed enough to recognize them as, oh, she must be at least 15, or she must be at least 16, or whatever that is. So that in itself was such a calamity, and I think this became too much for the Egba women, and so this was a cause that Funmilayo Ransom Kuti took on, and with the thousands, I think, of women, they went to the palace of the Alake of Egbaland, and I forgot what his name was now. And they protested, and they didn't succeed the first time. But it was sort of the persistency and the vigor with which the protest happened, and the level of conviction with which she fought for these women. And eventually the news got back to Britain of what was happening. And yet, they didn't succeed. But eventually, what had happened was eventually they succeeded, and the Alake of Egbaland had to step aside, and so
go.
I know, right? So in hindsight, you're thinking, good for you, for you to be able to unseat a local ruler of that caliber.
Yeah, it should not be underestimated
At all.
It should not be underestimated. And I think it was from this particular incident that she was named the Lioness of Lisabi. You know, like what a
title.
What a
Lioness.
Title. I love it. You know, that's because she really was able to galvanize. She was able to unite and galvanize the people, women in particular, to basically fight for what was right.
Yes.
And I think it's really incredible, and to get that title.
Yeah, no, totally, because she was fighting, apart from the taxation, she was also fighting for better representation of women in local governing bodies. So to think that, I mean, I don't know if to say she was a woman ahead of her time, but she was a woman of the times. Like, she understood the significance, because even till today we're fighting for representation, right, in many places, and this was someone who recognized it back then. So, because if there was representation within the governing bodies and people who were making these silly decisions about taxes and who to tax and when to tax them and how to tax them, surely a woman amongst them would know that, would be able to influence part of that decision. And so she recognized that, and that was able to, they were able to get some delegations within the governing bodies eventually.
And I think that's it's the point you make about the fact that even today there's underrepresentation of women in the current political space. So I think only about 7 or so of the 109 senators in Nigeria are women.
That is shocking.
Yeah, you hear that pause. It's just, we're stunned.
That is
at
shocking.
That. It's, and there are many other African, not many, but there are other African nations where they have legislation that says that there must be at least 50% representation of women. I just think, what's causing Nigeria to be so backwards? In not having something that in place when half your population
is being represented
is women. Like, you need to have that. You need to have a proper. Women are not being represented,
and oftentimes when they are being represented in quote in certain spheres, it's almost like a tokenism. It's like they putting them in positions that you can't really do much, and they put them in like really typical stereotypical positions, like women of Minister of Women Affairs or something like that. I'm not saying you can't do much. You've been a Minister of Women Affairs, but it's like they are able to do much more. They have the capacity, the power, the ability to be. And I know we've had like a woman be Minister of Finance and all that stuff in the past, but in the grand scheme of things, like you just rightly said, where are the women? You have them in other parastatals and things like that. But I think one of the arguments that has been made previously is just like how politics works in Nigeria, and how oftentimes the meetings are happening at nighttime or even in the middle of the night, and you would have to get up wherever. If you're married, is that really something you really want to be getting involved in? And also just how much money, there's a financial barrier as well. Can you afford this? And also just the dirty games of politics generally in Nigeria, where you need like a sponsor, there's a cabal that kind of controls the whole political scene. So actually that reminds me of this film I don't know. Have you heard of the King of Boys?
I have heard of it.
You're missing out.
Oh, really?
You need to, oh my days! This time last week.
This is our new recommendation of the. This is the recommendation portion of the podcast.
This is the recommendation. No, King of Boys. I feel like, you know, oftentimes you talk about Nigerian movies. Sometimes they're not rated. You're just you've been very lucky to find one where you're like, okay, but an excellent job was done. Why did I mention this? This was basically telling the story of this businesswoman, playing in a very kind of underworld, dirty games of politics.
She was like an underworld, like gangster, kingpin, character.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in the recent, because there's a part 2 kind of, which is a 6-part series. So the first part of the film, which was released in 2018, kind of gave us this introduction into her. Okay. And then the second part is not the return of the King of Boys, and she's come back from exile, and she's announced that she wants to become the governor of Lagos.
Okay.
And this is where the whole game begins, and you see the dirtiness. And I'm not saying that's exactly how it's done in real life. Who's to say that's not how it's done? But clearly there is a representation there of actually the kind of games that are played, and you know, people that are involved in this thing. So when we speak of why women are not in certain positions now in Nigeria, I think you get a picture from that of just the level of...
Okay, so if you want to get into Nigerian politics, don't watch The King of Boys.
But yeah, no, I would say just watch it for the fun of it and for the entertainment, and also just, for the thrill of it. It's an amazing production. Excellent cast. The woman who played the King of Boys, amazing woman. The funny thing is, this woman, right,
the actress in the
actress in the film, Shola Shobowale, she's known for, I mean, I grew up watching her on screen, and she was she's known for playing like feisty character, and like people always, she shouts, like, you know, she's one of those characters, right? But the thing about finding a good writer and a good director that can channel all of who you are and bring that to the screen, like, oh my days, I had goosebumps. There's 6 parts to this, I think 6 or 7 parts to the thing, and I literally we stayed up and watched it all from one you can't know if you watched it over a couple of days, then I don't know what's wrong with you.
Wow.
But literally it's that gripping. But we digress. Watch King of Boys, please. Thank you.
Cool. So hold on. The point that you were trying to make in terms of women getting into politics is that there's a lot that goes on that is off-putting. The fact that if politics is going on at night, then women who, especially mothers, nursing, or because parent duties are still primarily with the mother. It makes it difficult for...
But it shouldn't have to be like that, because when you've built a system that makes it that doesn't make it conducive for a certain gender to participate, then perhaps you need to start to review the kind of environment you've created for that,
and I think it's chicken or the egg, but that's why more women needs to be in prominent positions
to influence the change.
To influence the change, so that the systems and the culture that currently exists stops.
Yeah.
So what else about Funmilayo Kuti is of significance or has impacted you?
I think for me, when I think about her, it's just the level of conviction that you need to engage the way she did at the time that she did, with the people that she did. It's a testament to the kind of woman that she was. And you sometimes wonder, what was her motivation? Like, where did you know, sometimes you see certain people display certain strength of character, and you can't help but wonder, how did they, you know, today you would say, oh, they're role models and things like that. And, you know, sometimes you might think, oh, they were influenced by certain people, but I can't pinpoint and say she was influenced by this person or that person. But just having that strength of character to go through, and that strength of conviction, that level of conviction to fight for what you strongly believe in, is really important. And I think you were making a point earlier about, you know, other women who have sort of like followed in her path.
Yeah.
And maybe you want to speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, so like the former Minister of Education, Obi Ezekwesili, like she, you know, she's a really inspiring woman. She was a co-founder of the Bring Back Our Girls movement, which I think really ties in with, you know, the point around the importance of education. So you have this woman who is, you know, again, she's an activist that cares deeply about the progression of women's and girls' rights, you know, and is actively engaged in making sure that girls are protected, so that they can have an education. And I mean, for those who don't know about the Bring Back Our Girls campaign, that campaign was based off the fact that 267 or 76 girls from Chibok in northeast Nigeria were kidnapped from school by Boko Haram. And Boko Haram are a terrorist group that are active in that region who rejects the idea of Western, quote unquote, Western education, and it, you know, till this day, again, education for girls is still being attacked, and we still need to be fighting to make sure that girls' education is protected, and you know, it's great that this woman is so active in, you know, spearheading this campaign. And I mean, it got international around it. Michelle Obama, even she co-signed it, and, you know, put a picture up for it to gain worldwide prominence. But we need more. I feel as though she follows in the lineage that Kuti had set, you know, in making sure that women or girls' education is valued, because and the reason why it needs to be valued is so that women and girls who are educated, when they're educated, then they're able to get, you know, they have more opportunity for employment. And if they have more opportunity for employment, then they're able to earn money, have independence. They're able to raise funds where they can actually afford to pay for all the things that are required to even enter into formal politics. So this is why women's education is so important, and it's kind of like not full circle, but, you know, it's this dialectical thing of continuing to have we're continuing to have this conversation, or even, you know, in this even debate, or there's a question mark over whether or not girls, you know, should be educated.
Yeah, it's I mean, that's particularly in the northern parts of a dilemma in the northern parts of Nigeria, but then I also see that in just as a result of poverty generally in Africa or in Nigeria, where with a poor family, with a boy and a girl child, and you only have one option, one chance to educate one of your two children, one boy, one girl, the boy would probably get the education because they get better return for the investment. In quote is the general.
Yeah. It's the status quo. It's what's thought to be, but actually, I don't want to say the opposite. But when a nation educates their women, the country prospers.
Tell them.
When a nation educates their women, the nation prospers.
I want to click my fingers.
Like with all like governments around the world, when women were more active in spheres that were typically dominated by men, the nations have developed greatly and benefited greatly. The countries have become more productive, and that's regardless of like whether or not you're coming from the capitalist West, or during the time of even like the Soviet Union, communist nations, even in communist countries where they actually really valued the education of women, and they made great gains in sciences and all sorts of things. Like, you can't expect your country to develop without investing and developing the women and girls of your nation. And as we said, unfortunately, as we said in the previous episodes, we have we have ministers and political figures who are just not visionary.
Definitely.
But you don't even have to be a visionary. You just have to see what works with other countries. But
I guess it helps to keep perpetuating a certain type of society when you choose to turn a blind eye to the obvious of how beneficial educating a girl child is. But going back to what I found interesting about Funmilayo Ransom Kuti, we were talking about women being in political positions. She actually ran for she ran for political office a couple of times.
Yeah, she didn't do as well. Sorry, you continue.
Yeah, no, she didn't do it as well. And then the second time round, her party, can't remember what the party's name is now, they didn't put her up for the second time to run, and so she said she left them and then created her own party. I believe it was called the Communist Party, but that didn't gain the kind of momentum that she needed, and within a year it was disbanded. But also it was the way she affiliated with international communities. So she was she affiliated herself with like Cameroon, with Ghana, with Argentina,
with Egypt,
and China. She went to China and gave a speech. Actually, she gave a lecture.
I think she met Mao Zedong. No?
Yeah, whoever the leader at the time was. Yeah. But that, because she identifies as a socialist, or she's known as a socialist, but she wasn't particularly anti-communism. When she came back, there was a general anxiety about her going to China and coming back and spreading communist ideas to the women of Egba land. And so when she tried to renew her passport, I think maybe to go to America or wherever, she was rejected entry. And I think it was until Nigeria became independent that she was able to get entrance back into I kind of think it was America or somewhere now, or even the UK. So that level of affiliation is like you can't it's almost like you can't rub yourself with somebody and act like it's not going to rub off on you. Like if you I want to say roll in the mud, but that'll be me saying China is the mud, but figuratively you're going to get stained. And she got stained for quite a while. But I think when her husband died, because her husband died quite young. Well, I say quite young. He was older than her, but he died He died compared to when she died. He died quite a number, like a few decades before she did. And I think, yeah, that devastated her, and she just returned. I think she lived a more quiet life after that, in the sense that she returned and focused on the education of the school, focused on education and the school that she had established. But I think they ran into financial difficulties at some point as well, and I don't know what the legacy of that is. But she was definitely a very eventful woman, so to speak. But I have to say, as I said earlier to you, growing up, I always remembered her as the woman, or she was mostly projected as the woman who was the first to drive a car in Nigeria. So if you asked me when I was 8 or 10, or who was Funmilayo Kuti, I'm like, oh, she was the first woman to drive a car in Nigeria. But knowing all the things I now know, it's like she was much more than that, and that's not to trivialize, the importance of driving a car or what driving a car signifies. But like I said again earlier, is like killing a mosquito and then killing Goliath, and everybody decides to forget about the Goliath that you've killed and focus on the mosquito that you've killed. And it's like, well, there was murder, there was death in both cases, but one death is, yeah.
Yeah. I think, I'm really glad that we've spoken about her. I'm glad of the research that I've done into her. And I say one thing that I'm really happy about is the fact that her work stands alone.
Yes.
Her work stands alone. It has its own merit, and if you don't know already, I don't think we've mentioned him. She is the mother of a very, very famous Kuti.
Who could that possibly be?
Who could that possibly be? Yeah, right. So Fela Kuti, the famous Nigerian legendary musician
and activist.
She was his mother, and if anything, so I've heard of her name before, but it's always in reference to this is Fela Kuti's mother.
Right.
But the research that I've been doing, her work stands alone, and obviously her work was before, Kuti could do anything, because he either wasn't alive or he was a child. But I think that's a really important thing to honor women for the work that they've done in their own right, and not by their proximity to famous and powerful men.
Yeah.
Like, she demonstrated her own power. A lioness.
Listen, you don't get that title by just doing nothing.
By doing nothing, yeah.
And for her to have been called a lioness as well, it's like it was heavy.
Yeah.
But I think perhaps one of the reasons why she's so closely connected to Fela Kuti is because of the manner in which she died. Because obviously Fela Kuti, like we said, was an activist, and he opposed very strongly the military government at the time, and many of his songs, we should probably play one of the songs, was passing some sort of message, critiquing the government. And many times he was arrested. He had a lot of issues with the government, but eventually was capped when they stormed his house. He had this place where many of his friends and people could gather. I guess people with the same sort of mindset and ideologies and whatnot. It was called the Kalakuta Republic, and apparently was stormed by almost 1,000 soldiers, just to show the intensity of the attack that happened on that day. And again, we talk about how it's reflective of the military government at the time, but in all the tussle and whatever was going on, Fela Kuti's mother, Funmilayo Ransom Kuti, at the age of 78, she was thrown down a 2-story building. From the second story, from the second floor of the building. She was thrown down the building, and she sustained really serious injuries. This happened in February, I think 18th of February 1978, and by the 13th of April she died. She died on the 13th of April because she went into coma and all that stuff, and yeah, she just never recovered from that fall. And even at the point of death, because not many newspapers carried the news of her death to begin with, the two or so newspapers that did report about it, the front pages read, Fela Kuti's mother is dead. And you think, I mean, there's nothing wrong with referencing her son, because he's very much a part of her, and we can even go to the extent of saying the activism that he's known for was birthed from a mother who was very much an activist. Not many people speak about the dad, and he was quite a prominent figure in himself and did quite a lot in his area. But to just reduce this lioness on a front page of a newspaper and say Fela Kuti's mother is dead, I think it speaks to the kind of tension and political higiaga. Can't believe I used that word. The crinkle crankum, of the Nigerian media and the government at the time. What do you think?
I think you raise an interest. It might be going off on a tangent, but I think with that phrasing of Fela Kuti's mother, it can be seen. Some could argue that it's just reducing her to her motherhood. But then I suppose there could be other arguments that are saying that, but we should. Why do we think it's a reduction? It's still her motherhood, or being a mother is still an important thing and it's still important to who she was. So, because before, when we were preparing for this episode, I think I definitely thought, how can you simply just reduce her to, you don't even mention her name.
But
I guess that's the issue, right? It's the erasure of her name.
Yeah.
Right. It's just her son.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because when you think about it, we've talked in this episode about the Lioness of Lisabi. Right?
Yeah, it's true.
And all of a sudden, she dies, and then she's Fela Kuti's mother is it. I'm not upset if you say Fela Kuti's mother, visionary, activist, blah blah blah, and I don't care where in the list you pull Fela Kuti's name.
Yeah, just give a full picture of who she was. And I can't help but think it was very intentional, and yeah, it was very intentional. It was very intentional, and it was. But a legacy. You've talked about a legacy when you talk about Obi Ezekwesili. That's part of a legacy in a sense. But in terms of, do you think she's got a place in Nigeria's history? Do you think she's got the recognition and the acknowledgement? Do you think young Nigerians know about her, or? I think it's difficult not to know about her.
Mm-hmm.
So if young Nigerians, I'm sure they do, but I think in terms of maybe like national recognition, I think there was an attempt to recognize her by putting her on, putting her on one of the Naira bills. But then there was actually pushback from her family, because it's like, well, there's not even been an apology for the way you killed our mother. So what's this nonsense of putting her on the money when you haven't apologized to us? So I think for many women who were agitators, right, there's not really, I feel as though there won't be as much recognition, because you've got the sexism, and then the fact that, quite frankly, they represent something that is like anti-government, and
or anti the value of the society, or not value of the society, but anti the stereotype of whatever the society is.
And to be honest, because the Kuti family are still critical of the government, so it's like, well,
and that's what I was gonna say. Like, I think her family is one family, and I don't know if this is because of Fela, because really Fela's children are mostly the ones that are kind of more active and engaged and things like that. They've tried to maintain a kind of legacy that is still relevant till today. So many of us know like Femi Kuti, Seun Kuti, even Femi Kuti's sister Yeni Kuti. She's a host on a very popular Nigerian daytime show, and the Kalakuta Republic is now known as the Shrine, or maybe it was known as the Shrine before, I don't know, but it's known as the Shrine now. And it very much, and they have they have a festival every year or so that, recognizes the Kuti legacy, Fela Kuti's legacy, and everything that he stood for. And I think that is really, but the family have had to make a conscious effort to do that. Not the government, because if that was left to the government, that would have been erased a very long time ago. And this is not to say, this is not really lending any credibility or whatever to who Fela Kuti was or what they do now, but it's just to show the dynamic. Because when you compare it, for example, to like MKO Abiola's legacy and his children, is there anything in particular to show for who Abiola was? Not really.
Comparatively, no.
Comparatively, no. So, so that was Mrs. Funmilayo Ransom Kuti.
Say her name. Oh, okay.
Do you know what she also did? No. Do you know, towards the end of her life, because Ransom is like English anglicized
yes
name.
She rejected that.
She rejected it towards the end of her life. I think in 1970.
Yes,
and
she did.
Changed it to Anikulapo, which means death in my pocket or something like that. Kuti, and that's because her son had made that change. So perhaps when people say Fela's mother is dead,
I'm not really sure what you're trying to say there.
I'm trying to say maybe towards the end of her life, she stuck so much to her son's identity. Because if you're going to change your name from Ransom Kuti to Anikulapo Kuti, because then, I don't know, just a thought.
and we'll leave it there. We'll let the listeners linger on that. But no, it's been really good to speak about this amazing woman, and the legacy that she's left behind in her children, in other women who work in Nigerian activism. So we're glad to have spoken about her. Yeah, definitely. And now the task is for you guys to listen, to share, to like. Please support our ministry. We're trying. We're begging you, support our ministry. Hey, it's collection time.
Let's pass the basket around. Tithes and offering, we are trying to bring...
Please, you don't want to associate ourselves with that sort of thing.
Listen, we need the funds. Production's going to get better. Who knows? We might be bringing you... No, but honestly, thank you for listening. Do support, do like, do share. Find us on all the platforms: Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. And stay tuned for another episode
of Once Upon a Niger. Okay, bye.
Bye, guys.